So let's talk about how Hawaii can fix its affordable housing problem. On December 20th, 2022, the Honolulu Star Advertiser posted a story about the new Chief Housing Coordinator in the governor's office. In the article, it says, "Whatever happens, Madero said she wants to include anyone with an idea to speak to Green, our governor, one-on-one for 5 minutes to share their suggestions to solve problems toward the goal of increasing affordable housing." Now, I don't know if the offer was for real or she's just kidding, but if it was for real, here is my 5-minute pitch to the governor of the state of Hawaii to address the affordable housing issue. Hey, and sorry, governor, I know my whiteboard, but I can borrow yours, yeah? Hello from Hawaii. The idea is to build around the rail stations. There is state land around these rail stations in what is being referred to as transit-oriented development, or TOD zones. Let's build plenty of housing and mixed-use buildings around the rail stations on the state land. And I'm talking Japan style, like boom, right there on the rail stations. Now, these affordable housing projects are going to be rentals. And I know that people want to own, and that's wonderful, but fee simple affordable housing just isn't affordable, frankly. And even if it is, it doesn't stay affordable for very long. Even with state buyback options, because the state doesn't exercise those options. And so these units, once they go back on the market, they just get sold for the market price and they're lost forever. And I understand that some people don't like that because they want to build equity, and maybe the occupants don't take care of the units because they're just renting, and then you got to consider who's gonna maintain all of these projects. But if we don't seriously consider building a lot of rentals, fee simple housing is just not going to be affordable enough, and we can't control those prices. And I'd like to see us start building out on the west side. I'm talking Kapolei, UH West Oahu, Ho'opili, Westlock, and Waipahu. Let's just start there. Now, I know nothing is out there at those stations and that the rail start date is still questionable, but I say let's start there and get these projects going. And sure, they're probably all going to be finished before rail is fully functional, before people who live in these projects could actually take advantage of catching the rail into town. But I think because the housing prices and construction costs continue to rise, building now is better than building later. I also think that we need to build a lot of projects out there soon, because once some of the big time developers are done building in town, you know they're going to want to move out west and start building from the closest rail stations further out, and they're going to start dropping some of these luxury condos. So I say, let's start building some of these affordable rentals now. Particularly, I know that it's going to be very contentious near the new stadium, which is the Halawa station. And once that Aloha Stadium district gets figured out and fully developed and planned, it's going to be luxury stores and shops. And with those luxury stores are going to be very nice condos. And can I help that? It's just some developers are going to want to build that. There's a market for that, and the profit seems to be pretty great. So I say, let's build some affordable rentals while we still can before the rail starts rolling, and they'll probably be at their cheapest. And when it comes to these rental projects, people kind of expect a lot of amenities. It's going to be pretty bare. So no swimming pool, no game rooms, no theater rooms, no gyms. These units are just to live in. If you want to go swim, go beach. You want to go gym, just go pay and you can go gym. And if you want nice amenities, these aren't the units for you. This is just housing and parking. And speaking of parking, did you know that there's only 4 planned parking facilities along the rail? I don't know how they expect people to conveniently get to the nearest station. So to help subsidize these projects as well as provide much needed parking at these rail stations, I say allow public parking in some of these facilities that are attached to these projects. It's going to be a partnership between the rail and these projects, city and private, maybe even state and city. And these revenues can help keep the rents down as well as provide some money for upkeep and maintenance. And it may not be a lot, but hey, at least it's something, and the parking will help people potentially ride rail. So now let's talk about setting the rent prices. I don't believe that we can keep saying affordable, because that's just so subjective. Because if I make $200,000 a year, but I have numerous expensive like child support and 2 car payments and my kids going to private school and I gotta pay student loans, I don't have much left to be considered affordable, even if my income is pretty high. And so instead, hear me out, the rents need to feel like they're cheap. And I know that feeling is also subjective, so I understand that. And cheap means different things to different people. But to me, The rent needs to be where your average person, after they hear the rent, they go, oh, that's cheap. That needs to be the initial impression. So if that means $1,000 a month for a 1-bedroom, then let's think about trying to go as low as possible or as close to that number as possible and then move it up as we need to. Because sometimes I think when they determine, even with affordable rentals or even what can qualify for a potential buyer for some affordable for sale units, they're using formulas that involve the area median income and the average market rent, and they're using the consumer price index, and it's just too complicated. So I just say, just think, is this cheap? If it is, then it's affordable, because things that are cheap are affordable, but not everything that's affordable is cheap. And if that's too complicated, I say just take a look at the going rate around the area and just cut that by 30 to 40%. Now that is going to be cheap, and by cheap I mean affordable. And in terms of how do we get developers to do this? Now, I'm not a finance person, so I don't understand the intricacies of financing a project like from the perspective of a developer or a bank or a lending standpoint. And that's where the state will have to decide whether this is an issue that is important, whether it's one of the most important issues. And if it is, then the state will have to provide some subsidies. That's just how it's going to be. Now, maybe you don't need as many subsidies for the luxury developers or even regular for sale units, but for these rental units, I think the developers are going to need something, and that's going to help them keep the costs low. And the thing is, we have resources for this right now. We have the Rental Housing Trust Fund that provides money to developers to build rental housing units. Now, I've heard numbers like $500 million being given to them. And that's pretty high, but I say, let's go higher. Again, if we're serious about this, we gotta have the money for it. And when it comes to developers, particularly local developers, there are some who do actually provide housing for locals at an affordable rate. So I say let's work with them. And I understand that there's not gonna be a lot of profit in providing affordable rentals. The real money is in the luxury condos, obviously. So how do we incentivize these developers? And I say that we incentivize them by promising them volume. So by volume, I mean, instead of guaranteeing them 1 or 2 projects and then they dig out, I say let them build 1 to 2 projects for 4 or 5 or all of the West Side stations. And that's going to provide them with more long-term work and job security for their workers. I mean, it's kind of like in pro sports, particularly professional baseball and hockey. Some of the players sign these big contracts and long-term deals. And why? Because it provides job security. And if you're a local construction worker, knowing that you'll be building 10 projects in the next several years instead of just 1 project and you don't know if you'll be working on another job, to me that sounds better. And if you're wondering why we don't have this or some kind of plan for these TOD zones, I don't know why we don't. The Hawaii Interagency Council for Transit-Oriented Development was formed back in 2016 and has been trying to create a plan for these TOD zones. 7 years and millions of dollars of planning later, here we are, still planning. But you know what? It's not their fault. They have over 25 members, and when was the last time that a group of 20 plus people could agree on anything? Is that my 5 minutes? And that's my 5 minutes, I hope. Now, obviously, there are more details to be worked out in order to solve Hawaii's housing issue. And while it sometimes seems hopeless, particularly for those of us who are trying to buy a place, I think that the keys are the rail and rentals. I think that's the way to go, and that's the best strategy. Of course, I would love to buy a bigger place, a place that we could own and call our own. But if the rent is cheap, I think I'd be okay with renting, at least just for now. And that would take a lot of pressure off of the for sale market for these units being sold, where maybe we could start seeing some of these prices go down if locals and others start renting more. And I think that rentals also solve the issue of trying to keep things affordable or cheap for locals, because rent prices can be controlled a lot more than the fair market. I also know that this is an Oahu focused discussion and doesn't really address the housing issues on the neighbor islands. So I'm sorry about that, but I personally don't know enough about those communities, since I don't live there or haven't lived there, to be able to make a better recommendation. However, I'm just assuming that the introduction of a lot of cheap rentals on the neighbor islands will improve housing for everyone. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and aloha.